Why are you here? What's that? What's happened?
Behind the smiles and state banquets, an internal war just fractured Buckingham Palace. Princess Anne just completely dismantled Queen Camilla's latest palace plan with a single devastating move so precisely timed that Camilla never saw it coming. This wasn't a minor disagreement. It was a calculated, brilliant strike that completely rewrote the palace power dynamic overnight. Keep watching to get the full story. The plan, nobody was supposed to see something, was happening inside the palace in January 2026. Something quiet, something that was never meant to be seen by the public. By the time the right people finally found out about it, the machinery was already running at full speed. That is the part the palace does not want discussed. To fully understand how this crisis unfolded, let us go back to where it really began. King Charles was 77 years old. He had been undergoing intensive cancer treatment since February 2024. Publicly, he maintained a brave face. He was still showing up, still signing official documents, and still sitting through tedious official engagements. But everyone working inside those historic stone walls knew the sobering truth. He was simply not running things the way he once had. The vital energy just wasn't there anymore. The royal grip had significantly loosened. In a hyper-competitive place like Buckingham Palace, a loosened grip does not stay empty for long. Prince William had been actively filling that vacuum. He did it quietly at first, and then much less quietly. He was consistently in the high-level rooms where major decisions were made. Most notably, he was leading the complex crisis strategy surrounding Prince Andrew's arrest in February 2026. William was the specific figure palace staff looked to whenever things went wrong. He had not been crowned yet, but in every single way that actually mattered to the realm, he was already acting like a king. That sudden shift was the exact window of opportunity Camilla spotted. Here is the explosive part that was never supposed to come out. Sources close to the royal household confirmed that, beginning in December 2025, Camilla had been making strategic moves, careful ones, the kind that leaves no obvious footprints. She had been lobbying through hidden intermediaries and, never directly, for ultimate control of something called the Royal Communications Oversight Committee. Most everyday people have never heard of it. That is exactly the point. This powerful committee operates almost entirely out of public view. It oversees all royal messaging. It strictly controls what gets said, when it gets said, and exactly how it gets framed to the global press. It manages every official statement, every public announcement, and every narrative that comes from the institution. In simple terms, whoever sits at the top of that committee controls the story. In a monarchy fighting desperately to preserve its reputation amid the worst scandal in a generation, controlling the narrative is everything. Camilla's argument sounded perfectly reasonable on the surface. Charles was operating in a greatly reduced capacity. William was completely consumed by the Andrew crisis. There was an obvious coordination gap. Someone senior needed to provide reliable oversight. She was the queen consort and available. Who could possibly be better? But here is what you need to understand. The argument was intentionally designed to sound reasonable because the real objective had nothing to do with coordination gaps. Royal insiders confirmed that what Camilla actually wanted was the power to shape how the Andrew crisis was presented publicly. She wanted to dictate how William's growing authority was framed in palace communications. Most importantly, she wanted to control how her role in the monarchy appeared to the outside world, at the very moment when people were starting to ask hard questions about her future within it. Ask yourself this: does that sound like a queen consort focused on supporting her husband through a health crisis? Or does it sound like someone who has read the room, understood that power is shifting, and decided to move before the door closes? The people inside that palace read it one way. Every single one of them. Tom Parker Bowles was doing the groundwork. Internal memos reviewed by royal insiders show he had been contacting committee members directly. Not officially, but socially. Dinners in the right postcodes. Conversations that started with pleasantries and ended with implications. By late January 2026, at least one committee member had privately indicated they would support a motion to expand the Queen Consort's formal involvement. The plan was close, dangerously close, and then Princess Anne found out. What she did next is something palace insiders are still talking about. Before we get there, you need to understand who Anne actually is inside the machinery of this family. If you only know the public version, you simply do not know enough. Anne's position. The royal nobody underestimates twice. There is a version of Princess Anne that the public knows well. She is the famously non-nonsense royal, the practical figure in the sensible coat, who shows up to agricultural shows and charity events without complaint and without drama. That version of the Princess Royal is real, but it is not the whole picture, not even close. Inside the palace walls, Anne operates on a completely different frequency from almost every other senior royal. At 75 years old, she has served the British crown without a moment's interruption, and without a single scandal for over 5 consecutive decades. By every measurable metric and statistical count, she reliably completes more official engagements per year than any other working member of the royal family. Her diary outpaces Prince William's, and it comfortably exceeds the numbers logged by King Charles, even during his absolute prime. Yet, she never chases media coverage. She does not attempt to build a modern personal brand. She does not need to. Her deep authority inside the institution was never built on public affection or transient popularity. Instead, it was constructed on a foundation that lasts much longer. Absolute, unshakable trust. Specifically, she possessed the complete, unyielding trust of her late mother, Queen Elizabeth II. This unique bond was earned over decades of quiet loyalty and was never once broken through crisis or temptation. That foundational relationship matters enormously to this story. When Queen Elizabeth died in September 2022, she did not simply leave behind property and legal documents, she left behind a highly sophisticated network. It was an intricate web of relationships woven deeply into the very fabric of royal operations, comprising senior courtiers, trusted legal advisors, and core institutional stakeholders, devoted individuals who had quietly served the crown for 30 or 40 years. At the absolute center of that formidable network, functioning as its most reliable anchor, sat Princess Anne. People who worked intimately with Queen Elizabeth describe Anne in almost identical reverent terms. She was, they frequently say, the monarch's ultimate eyes and ears when the queen could not be physically everywhere at once. Anne understood the monarchy not as a mere family business or a vehicle for personal advancement, but strictly as an enduring constitutional responsibility. Crucially, she never once conflated those two concepts over her 50 years of public service. Here lies the critical hidden variable that most external observers completely miss. Anne and Prince William are far more aligned than they ever appear in public. When William was urgently pushing in the 2019 for Prince Andrew's immediate removal from official royal duties, his warnings were being dismissed by almost everyone surrounding the family. Yet, Anne was not dismissing his concerns. She was listening intently. She was calmly assessing the damage and methodically filing everything away for future reference. The aunt and nephew share a profound connection that is less about simple family affection and more like a cold, strategic understanding of the same systemic truth. The institution of the monarchy must always come before any single individual within it. Always. Now, this precise dynamic explains why Queen Camilla made such a serious, short-sighted mistake in her calculations. Camilla has historically always operated exclusively through Charles. Her political power, her daily access, and her strategic influence all run directly through the king. While that is not unusual or unexpected for a royal consort, it inevitably creates a massive institutional blind spot. When an individual works through a single channel for long enough, they start to believe that that channel is the only one that truly matters. You start dangerously confusing mere physical proximity to the king with actual systemic authority over the monarchy. Those two things are entirely separate. Anne's internal authority does not flow through Charles, and it never did. It flows directly through 50 years of flawless public service, through the eternal trust of a dead queen, and through deep institutional relationships that predate Camilla's connection to this family by several decades. When Camilla built her long-term strategy, she mapped only the obvious power structures. She accounted for William's independent streak and Charles's vulnerabilities. However, she failed to fully account for Anne. That oversight was the ultimate mistake, the kind of strategic miscalculation you do not get to make twice in the palace. Stay with us, because what the Princess Royal did next was completely unexpected. and the surgical way she executed it left Camilla with absolutely no avenue to fight back. The devastating move, what Anne actually did. It was January 29th, 2026. What quietly transpired inside the Lord Chamberlain's office on that cold winter morning will be studied for decades by historians, constitutional scholars, and anyone who truly wants to understand how real, unyielding power moves inside the British royal family when the formal hierarchy finds itself under immense strain. Princess Anne did not take her grievances to the British press. She did not orchestrate a dramatic confrontation with Queen Camilla in a palace corridor. She did not sit down to write a furious, emotionally charged private letter to her brother, the king, nor did she ever raise her voice to subordinates. She did absolutely none of the theatrical things that routinely make scandalous tabloid headlines. What she chose to do instead was far quieter, far more calculated, and ultimately infinitely more effective. Anne formally and systematically requested a comprehensive constitutional review of the Royal Communications Oversight Committee's entire governance structure. She submitted this highly disruptive request directly through Sir Edmund Hartley, the Lord Chamberlain himself, acting in his official capacity as the Chief Administrative Officer of the royal household. To ensure the request carried absolute institutional authority, she explicitly cited her unique standing as a senior working royal, her lifelong dedication to the crown, and her position as a long-standing, highly respected member of the Privy Council. The administrative machinery of the state ground forward, and the request was formally granted within 48 hours. The exact moment that the signature was applied, something happened that Camilla and her ambitious advisors had completely failed to prepare for. A little-known procedural freeze was triggered automatically within the palace infrastructure. Under the strict governing bylaws of the household, the launch of a formal constitutional review meant that all administrative changes were instantly locked in place. There could be absolutely no changes made to the committee's membership. There could be no adjustments to its remit, its budget, or its operational scope. Nothing moves, nothing changes, and nothing is voted upon until the entire review is certified as complete. Let the absolute brilliance of that tactical maneuver sink in for a moment. With one single, formal procedural request, filed through completely legitimate and unassailable constitutional channels, Anne had rendered Camilla's long-term plan structurally impossible. The sympathetic committee member, whom Tom Parker Bowles had so carefully cultivated over months of private dinners, could no longer table his planned motion to alter the palace's media strategy. The extensive social and political groundwork Tom had laid over weeks of networking became completely worthless overnight. The specific window of opportunity Camilla had so carefully positioned herself to step through was simply closed. It was not violently broken, it was not publicly contested. It was merely closed by the invisible hand of bureaucracy. But Anne did not stop there. Attached to her formal review submission was a secondary document that absolutely nobody in Camilla's ambitious inner circle had anticipated. It was 37 pages long. It consisted of a dense, exhaustive constitutional precedent report, meticulously cross-referencing every single historical instance across centuries of British history in which a consort-level royal figure had been granted formal oversight authority or editorial control over institutional communications. The document was methodical, historically precise, and completely damning to Camilla's modern aspirations. In every single historical case, Anne cited with clinical precision, those specific expansions of consort authority had either immediately preceded periods of catastrophic institutional crisis or had been forcefully reversed following damning internal governance reviews. The terrifying implication of the report was never stated outright in the text. It did not need to be. Anyone reading those 37 pages understood exactly what the Princess Royal was saying to the leadership of the institution. The palace has been here before. It never ends well. We are absolutely not doing it again. A senior courtier who reviewed the submission later described it in one devastating phrase that has since circulated quietly and repeatedly through the private palace corridors: the most elegant institutional knife in royal history. There was no blood spilled on the carpets. There was no public drama for the media to feast upon. There was no personal attack leveled against the Queen. There was just precedent, procedure, and the crushing weight of institutional memory dropped at exactly the right physical and political moment. And then came the final, devastating part of the strategy that truly finished the matter. As an official part of the ongoing review process, Anne formally requested immediate access to the committee's complete correspondence logs for the preceding 60 days. Those logs are formal, legally protected institutional records. They are explicitly not private communications, meaning they are entirely exempt from personal privacy claims. They would show in plain, documented, unvarnished form every single contact that had been made between Tom Parker Bowles and various committee members in the anxious weeks leading up to the execution of the plan. Every private dinner, every late-night phone call, every text message, and every implied professional arrangement would be laid bare. Anne did not need to characterize any of these interactions as improper or corrupt. The cold, hard electronic record would easily do that work for her. The request was legally unassailable and therefore granted. The logs were immediately pulled from the palace servers. By the time anyone in Camilla's stunned circle fully understood the terrifying scope of what had just been permanently placed on the official record, it was already too late to change a single word or delete a single timestamp. You have to ask yourself something fundamental about the nature of power. How do you fight back against a rigorous constitutional review submitted through official channels, supported by 37 pages of historical precedent, and accompanied by a formal document request that is entirely within the reviewer's legal authority to make? The honest, brutal answer is that you simply cannot. And Camilla knew it the exact moment she sat down and read what had been filed against her household. What happened next inside the walls of Clarence House is something that the shaken palace staff who were present that afternoon will not forget quickly. Camilla's reaction. Fury behind closed doors. The news reached Camilla on the afternoon of January the 30th, 2026. She was at Clarence House sitting in the morning room, where the winter light always felt thin and uninviting. Sources close to the royal household say she read the communication twice, her eyes moving deliberately across the heavy cream paper. The initial reading brought a sudden, rigid stillness to her posture. The second reading merely confirmed the absolute finality of what was written. Then she asked everyone in the room to leave. Her voice was entirely devoid of inflection, a flat command that brooked no hesitation or polite delay from her private secretaries. What happened in the minutes that followed will never be officially confirmed by Buckingham Palace, nor will it find its way into any public archives. But the people who were within earshot that afternoon, the staff standing in the carpeted corridor outside the heavy mahogany doors, have not forgotten it. There was no shouting, no crashing of porcelain, but rather an oppressive, heavy silence that seemed to leak out from under the door, punctuated only by the sharp, rhythmic pacing of low heels across the floorboards. What is confirmed is what came next. Within 2 hours, Camilla had summoned her son, Tom Parker Bowles, and her chief legal liaison for an emergency meeting. The urgency of the summons disrupted schedules across London. It lasted 3 hours, stretching late into the bleak January evening, while tea grew cold on silver trays. By the time it ended, everyone in that room understood the same thing. The plan was not delayed. It was not rerouted to fight another day. It was finished, dead on arrival. The procedural freeze engineered against them was entirely airtight, leaving no room for a counter-offensive or an administrative appeal. The precedent document unearthed by the Princess Royal made any public challenge to the comprehensive review politically catastrophic for the Queen Consort's camp. Furthermore, the meticulously compiled correspondence logs meant that any attempt to frame Anne's sudden move as a petty personal attack would backfire completely. It would immediately shine a very bright light on exactly the kind of back-channel maneuvering, quiet lobbying, and institutional leverage that Camilla least wanted, examined by the public or the Prime Minister. There was no path forward, none. Every legal avenue was blocked, and every political escape route was securely boarded up. Tom Parker Bowles was, according to internal sources, considerably less composed than his mother in those frantic hours. He lacked the decades of royal conditioning that taught one to mask fury with a placid smile. He had spent months diligently building those specific committee relationships, believing he was acting with total discretion. He had attended endless, tedious dinners he had absolutely no personal interest in. He had cultivated fragile conversations with institutional figures who were beneath him, both professionally and personally. He had done all of it because the ultimate plan felt tantalizingly close, because it felt like it was finally going to work, establishing a new reality within the palace hierarchy. And now, with a single administrative stroke, every single interaction he had painstakingly conducted had been retroactively reframed by Anne's formal log request. What he had viewed as subtle diplomacy was now preserved on paper as evidence of irregular influence operations. The humiliation was profound. He canceled 2 high-profile public appearances in the first week of February 2026, retreating entirely from the social circles he usually frequented. Those close to him say his schedule had nothing to do with it. He simply could not stomach facing the quiet, knowing smirks of the palace insiders who already knew he had been checkmated. Now, consider the position Charles was in. This is the part of the complex story that makes everything infinitely more complicated and painful for the household. The king was formally informed of the review on January the 31st, a day after his wife received the devastating news. He did not intervene to protect his wife's interests. He did not contact Anne to question her authority or her decision. He did not slow the process, nor did he soften its devastatingly broad scope. He let it stand completely, an immovable object in the middle of his own court. In a family where the king's silence carries exactly as much weight as an official statement broadcast to the nation, that silence was read with absolute terrifying clarity by everyone inside those ancient stone walls. Charles was not going to protect Camilla from Anne. Not over this. Not when the foundational rules of the monarchy were at stake. A source familiar with the king's thinking was exceedingly careful in describing his position to contemporaries. Charles understood, they said, that his ability to manage the delicate modern institution depends entirely on the people around him acting with absolute integrity and transparency. Anne had acted with integrity, defending the established boundaries of the crown. He was not going to undermine that defense, even if it meant witnessing the dismantling of his wife's quiet ambitions. But there is a much harder, more bruising truth sitting right underneath that convenient institutional explanation. Charles had known the plan was actively developing over the autumn and winter months. He had seen it take shape in private memos and whispered conversations. He was fully aware of Tom's contacts on the strategic committee, and yet he had not stopped it himself. He had chosen a path of passive avoidance, which means Anne stepped in and did what Charles either could not or would not do. She became the enforcer of the family rules, and he let her do it without a word of protest. The relationship between Camilla and Anne has never been warm, a fact that has remained an open secret in royal circles for nearly 4 decades. The scars of the past run deep. Anne's fierce, unwavering loyalty to Diana, Princess of Wales, her visceral coldness toward the extramarital affair during the painful years when it caused Diana so much public and private agony, and her stubborn refusal to offer Camilla the private endorsements or warm, sisterly welcomes that might have made the agonizing transition into this family easier after 2005. All of that bitter history sits permanently between them like an unbridgeable chasm. But what January the 29th established was something entirely new and far more dangerous for Camilla. It is established that when Camilla moves against the institution's core interests, Anne will move directly against Camilla, not out of old petty grudges from the 1980s, not out of lingering loyalty to a dead woman, though that ghost-led loyalty has never fully disappeared from the Princess Royal's heart. It comes out of something simpler, colder, and far more permanent: deep institutional conviction. Camilla always knew Anne did not like her on a personal level. What she had never reckoned with was that Anne would act on that dislike with this kind of devastating, clinical precision. She knows now, and that terrifying knowledge is not going away. William's silent victory. William learned the full details of Anne's review submission on the morning of January the 30th, 2026. Sources close to the Prince of Wales describe his response in terms that will surprise nobody who has followed him closely. He said very little. He asked a small number of precise questions about the procedural timeline. He confirmed that the review would proceed through official channels without any involvement from his office. And then he went back to work. That restraint was not accidental. It was the most important decision he made that week. Here is why. The one thing that could have undone Anne's move was any visible connection between her action and William's office. If Camilla's allies could point to coordination between Anne and William, they could reframe the entire review as a politically motivated attack orchestrated by the heir to the throne. That would have given Camilla something to fight. But there was no connection. There is no connection. William made absolutely certain of that. The review stands as Anne's alone, rooted in her own authority, executed through her own standing, requiring no endorsement from William, and offering no leverage to anyone seeking to use it against him. But do not misread his silence as passivity. William understood exactly what Anne had handed him. She had not just stopped a plan, she had demonstrated something far more valuable. The people aligned with his vision for the monarchy were prepared to act. They were capable of acting with precision, and they were doing so through channels so constitutionally grounded that challenging them would mean challenging the integrity of the institution itself. That is not a small thing. That is the foundation of a functioning institutional coalition. And William now knows, with complete certainty, exactly how it works and who will move when it matters. Think about what he has built over the past 18 months. He removed Annabel Elliot from the Duchy of Cornwall payroll. He received authority from Charles to issue royal warrants. He led the strategy on Andrew's removal. He has been the visible face of stability during the worst royal scandal in a generation. Each of those moves built something, but they were all moves that could be attributed directly to William. What Anne did on January the 29th was different. It was independent. It was corroboration from the palace's senior generation, from people whose institutional credibility is beyond question, moving in alignment with William's direction without being instructed to do so. That is a different kind of loyalty, and it is a considerably more powerful one. One royal source described it in a way that has since become a quiet refrain in palace corridors. William did not win this one. He did not need to. Anne won it for the crown, and the crown is increasingly his. That distinction matters. Real authority inside this monarchy is not demonstrated only through the moves you make yourself. It is demonstrated by the actions other people take on behalf of the same values without being asked. Anne was not asked. She acted because she saw something that needed to be stopped. And the fact that her action aligns perfectly with William's vision is no coincidence. It is evidence of something that cannot be manufactured or staged. A shared understanding of what the monarchy must be, and what it must refuse to become. Looking closely at the broader context of 2026, the structural changes William has engineered are becoming increasingly apparent. The removal of Queen Camilla's sister, Annabel Elliot, from the Duchy of Cornwall payroll was a clear early indicator of William's determination to streamline and modernize the estate's finances. These moves reflect a deliberate shift in royal governance. Rather than relying on traditional family networks, the Prince of Wales is prioritizing merit, constitutional propriety, and a disciplined approach to the royal portfolio. The timing of Anne's review is also crucial. It came at a juncture where questions about the future direction of the House of Windsor were beginning to surface publicly. By stepping in to halt the plan through entirely constitutional avenues, the Princess Royal reinforced the idea that the institution has built-in mechanisms to protect itself from overreach. It signaled to the public and the political establishment that the senior royals are vigilant guardians of the crown's long-term interests, even when it involves navigating complex internal dynamics. William's response, when it became publicly visible, was entirely characteristic. On February the 5th, 2026, he attended a scheduled engagement at a veterans welfare program in Bristol. He was relaxed. He was focused. He gave no indication whatsoever that anything of significance had occurred inside the palace in the preceding week. No statement, no visible satisfaction. Just a future king doing his work, secure in the knowledge that the institution is moving in the right direction, and that the people he trusts most inside it are making sure of it. This public stoicism perfectly encapsulates the Prince of Wales's broader approach to modern kingship. By focusing on his charitable patronages, such as the Earthshot Prize and mental health initiatives, William demonstrates that he is firmly focused on the future. He lets his actions speak louder than words, keeping internal palace maneuvers behind closed doors, while he focuses on solidifying public trust and institutional stability. For William, the transition of power is not just about assuming the throne. It is about ensuring that the institution itself remains resilient, principled, and unequivocally aligned with his vision for a modernized monarchy. What this means for the monarchy's future. Step back from the immediate drama for a moment. Look at the larger picture, because what happened between January the 29th and February the 5th, 2026, is not just a story about one blocked plan. It is a chapter in a much longer story about what this monarchy is becoming, who is driving it, and who is being left behind. Because her position deserves honest examination. When Charles eventually passes and William becomes king, Camilla will lose the formal authority her title currently confers. She will keep Clarence House and Highgrove. Those are personally inherited properties. They will provide her with a private life that is comfortable and stable. But Sandringham, Balmoral, the working estates, the institutional access, the formal weight of being queen consort, all of that moves to Catherine. That transition was always coming. Everyone knew it. But it now arrives in a specific context. Camilla has been seen attempting to consolidate institutional influence. She has been stopped through a formal constitutional procedure. Her son's commercial ambitions have repeatedly collided with the legal architecture that Queen Elizabeth spent years building around William's future. Her room to maneuver is not just smaller than it was 2 years ago. It is structurally smaller in ways that no amount of social lobbying can reverse. Catherine's position tells the opposite story. Her recovery from cancer, conducted with a transparency that transformed public feeling toward her into something deeper than celebrity, established her as the emotional center of the monarchy's next chapter. Her coordination with palace staff, her visible presence at the moments that mattered, all of it points toward a queen consort who will be far more than a supportive figure standing elegantly beside her husband. She will be a architect of what this institution becomes. The courtiers know it, the legal advisors know it, the institutional stakeholders have already begun orienting toward her, quietly, permanently, and Anne. Her role in all of this deserves a final word. It is easy to focus on the tactical brilliance of January the 29th and miss what it actually represented. Anne will not be a major public figure in the William era. She is 75. Her working years, however extraordinary, are finite. But what she demonstrated through this single decisive action is that the values she has spent her entire royal life defending are not disappearing with her generation. They are being passed forward to William, to Catherine, and through the precedents that actions like this one establish for whoever comes after them. There is a line that has been quietly repeated inside palace walls since this story concluded. A senior aide who has served both generations put it simply: Anne did not just stop a plan, she drew a line. Everything on Camilla's side of it is the past. Everything on William's side of it is what this monarchy is going to be. One procedural request, 37 pages of constitutional precedent, and a formal log request that put everything on record without a single accusation. That is what it took to end a plan that had been months in the making, that had the backing of a queen consort, that had a committee member ready to move, and that had Tom Parker Bowles working the room with the confidence of someone who believed he had already won. He had not won. None of them had. Because they had not accounted for the one person in that palace who has spent 50 years watching exactly this kind of move being made, who knows precisely what it looks like, and who knows, with the certainty of someone who has never once broken faith with the institution, exactly how to stop it. Anne moved once. Camilla never recovered. And the monarchy, quietly and without fanfare, took one more step toward becoming what Queen Elizabeth always intended it to be. Anne did not shout. She did not threaten. She filed 37 pages and let the institution do the rest. That is what real power looks like inside Buckingham Palace. Not the power that comes from a title or a marriage. The power that comes from 50 years of never once putting yourself before the crown. Camilla built a plan. Anne dismantled it without raising her voice, and William watched it all happen without saying a single word, because he did not need to. If this story told you something the palace would rather you did not know, hit the like button right now. Subscribe so you never miss what is really happening behind those doors. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single